Chris Maddox for the crossover alongside Howard Beck and Michael Shapiro. Guys, the NBA is headed towards a 4-team playoff tournament, which for most sounds exciting on the outside. But NBA players, coaches, and now owners in Mark Cuban are not all that amped about it. Howard, should the NBA, which has some power here, just scrap the idea of the play-in tournament?
No, by all means, no, they should not be scrapping the play-in tournament. I mean, look, this is a one-year trial basis, so let's see how it actually unfolds. But the people who are complaining, it's mostly because, like the Mavericks, they don't like the idea that if they're seventh or eighth, they are within a couple of hiccups of missing the playoffs entirely. It's double elimination if you were seventh or eighth. It's single elimination if you were ninth or 10th. And yes, you could potentially lose, be knocked out, and never make the playoffs, lose to a team that was far below you in the standings. I get that. But listen, the seventh and eighth seeds are cannon fodder anyway. They almost never win in the playoffs. So what you're really arguing for is I shouldn't be taken out of this position where I'm an automatic seventh seed as the Dallas Mavericks so that I can go be sacrificial lambs in the first round. Look, this has increased engagement by the fans. It's increased excitement. There are teams that are jockeying just to get to 10th. So that means the 11th and 12th place teams still have something to play for right now, which means their fans are still interested. That's good for the NBA. Might not be good for every individual team, but it's good for the NBA at large.
Yeah, I feel like Howard's really hitting the nail on the head here. Perhaps I understand why the Mavericks are complaining because they are a pretty impressive team that could fall out in this kind of play-in tournament. But by and large, are these 7 or 8 seeds ever really contending for the title anyway? I say no way. I mean, there's very little example of that throughout the game's history. And then also, I think when it's a regular season measure, it is pretty helpful to have a lot of teams now jockeying for position, trying to get that 9 seed, trying to get them 10 seed. You know, these owners, they kind of like the extra revenue they can get from a couple play-in games here. I think it's kind of an effective anti-tanking measure. I think it does become an exciting event for the first round, ahead of the first round, when in reality, the first set of games during the playoffs are kind of boring anyway. I mean, how many times do we have to see LeBron James blow past Reggie Jackson and the Pistons or whatever boring 7 or 8 seed you're going to put there? So why not? Let's have some excitement. I think it's kind of sour grapes right now for Mark Cuban and the Mavericks.
Yeah, I think the play-in game maybe should stay. I don't think we need to do a 4-team playoff tournament at the end of the season every single year. I think that was brought in to add a little more intrigue to this season. But going forward, I would like to just see the 8th and 9th seeds compete for that 8th spot. I would like to only see that happen if the 9th seed is within, say, one game. I don't need to see an 8 seed have to play a 9 seed if the 9 seed is like 6 games back and doesn't really deserve that opportunity based on the regular season. So I think it should stay with a little bit of a wrinkle. But Howard, you wrote about this in your morning shoot around on Monday. This is part of kind of a broader argument about how the business of basketball is maybe getting in the way of basketball a little bit. And look, to that question, I would answer the NBA should have gone into a bubble. They should have done it, not for the whole season. I'm not saying do a 6-month bubble, Howard, but they should have done a 6-week or an 8-week or a 2-month bubble where you didn't have to deal with all the stuff that you had to deal with in the first couple of months of the season with the COVID interruptions, which maybe would have helped with some of the injuries, not have to pack so many games all the way together. That part of the argument I agree with, that there's too much business, that the business of the game got in the way of the actual game itself this year.
We're in mid-April, and you are still talking about your beloved bubble. Man, look, the reason that the Mavericks are complaining is because they were one of the teams most impacted by COVID back in January when the country was on fire and the NBA was having to postpone games left and right, and the Mavericks lost a ton of player games.
Yeah, and who could have predicted
COVID.
that? Who could have predicted that the country would be on fire after December and Christmas? It's the most predictable screw-up that could have possibly been made.
Well, and that, to your point and to what Fred VanVleet said over the weekend, that's where the business of the NBA kind of overwhelmed the basketball part of it. They made a business decision, all of them together, players and owners and league office, and this is what befell them. These are the circumstances they've had to deal with. But listen, the same case the Mavericks are making for why they don't want to the play-in and don't want to be stuck at 7th where they have this very fragile existence is the same reason why you should have it, which is this. a lot of weird stuff has happened this season. A lot of unfortunate stuff has happened this season, whether COVID and postponements, injuries that maybe because of the schedule. And because of that, it actually makes sense, at least this season, to have a little bit more forgiving scenario where the ninth and 10th teams can actually play their way into the playoffs. Because depending on when your injuries happen or when your COVID problems happened, you may be trying to make up for lost time. And so let's be a little bit more lenient in this season at least. And also, let's just see how it goes. By the way, the bottom line is this, Chris. I understand like eighth versus ninth, like that makes more sense competitively. Like ninth is not usually that far from eighth. But the benefits of having the 10th place team involved also, look at it this way. Right now in the West, you only have 3 teams that are definitely out: Oklahoma, Minnesota, and Houston. New Orleans and SAC are still in the running for the play-in. In a normal year with no play-in, we're already writing them off. They're tanking. Cleveland, Detroit, and Orlando in the East are definitely out, but Toronto, Chicago, and Washington are still jockeying for play-in, and because of that, there's still reason for them to compete and for their fans to be interested. I don't see how that could be a bad thing.
Well, I'm not sure how you want to reward, mediocrity. Like, I mean, in that case, let everybody.
They
make
do it all the
playoffs.
time in the NBA with the 7th and 8th seeds, especially.
But yeah, I look. I think there's a middle ground, though. I think there's a middle ground where you reward the 9 seed for playing hard and putting themselves in position to fight for a playoff spot by giving them a puncher's chance to get into the playoffs as that number 9 seed. Everything else, the number of teams is too many for me. You got 20 teams potentially competing for playoff spots. There's 30 teams in the NBA. We don't need 2/3 of the league fighting for a position in the playoffs. For more, check us out over at SI.com.